tell-all book by the former White House Press Secretary Scott McClellan. Let's pick up with part two of my interview with the former White House counselor, Dan Bartlett. He says the failures in responding to Hurricane Katrina were emblematic of this White House. It was a failure, he writes, of imagination and initiative, and when the storm hit and the damage proved worse than anyone expected, our ability to adjust bespoke a failure of responsibility. He was with the press secretary during Katrina, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the president himself, in an address to the nation, accepted responsibility for the shortcomings of the response, not only at the federal level, but all levels of government, Wolf. It was a catastrophe in which this nation had never faced before. Our response to that could have been better. We have been very candid about that. And Scott tried to contribute in some respects. I think some of the points he makes in his book where he impressed upon himself, a lot of people are scratching their heads because they don't necessarily recall those moments. But the bottom line is that that was an enormous catastrophe. It could have been handled better. We did our best under very trying circumstances, and politicians at all levels of government were held responsible by the public because they felt we could have done a better job.
He also makes a very serious charge against Karl Rove and Scooter Libby, saying, in effect, that they conspired to create their own story, that they would tell federal prosecutors, and that they lied to him, and he, in effect, went out and told bad information to the American people through the news media. That's a very serious charge he makes.
It is, Wolf, and I must start by saying this entire episode or chapter in the administration which we were dealing with this leak investigation was incredibly difficult for all of us, especially for Scott, because he was the one who had to be the public face. And it was a very interesting dynamic internally because we were ordered not to talk to each other or to collaborate about what had happened by the prosecutors. So it was hard for us to discern from each other what our true feelings were because we were told, frankly, not to. And in this case, and it's really striking because really the whole theme of Scott's book is that he doesn't like the way Washington works. It's kind of this deception, it's this, it's that, and that this whole way of how we operate in Washington is bad. And then he does one of the very things that makes it bad in Washington. He throws out an allegation about Karl Rove and Scooter Libby that he doesn't have enough evidence to support. He says that Karl and Scooter never met privately, that this was a rare moment. I saw them meet privately all the time. And then it was a private meeting. Scott was not in the meeting, yet he jumps to this broad conclusion that the two of them must have been up to no good. So I find that very troubling.
Is he lying in this book?
You know, that's the type of things, whether it's betrayal or is he lying, I can't speak to Scott's motives. I can only say from the perch that I sat and the meetings I witnessed is that I think I have a much different portrayal of this president than Scott does. And I can't explain to you why he has today decided to come out with all of these views that he apparently held throughout the entire time he served in the White House, yet said nothing to anybody.
Have you? Do you regret hiring him? I guess that's the question.
All I would say is that there is an enormous amount of disappointment among those who are closest to Scott. This is not the Scott we knew. Maybe that is our fault. Maybe this is a new Scott. It's almost like an out-of-body experience, quite frankly. And but, you know, it's a lesson learned, that's for sure. We're
going to be speaking to him here in the Situation Room. What would you ask him if you could?
Well, you know, like I said, Scott is a friend of mine, a colleague that I worked very closely with. I won't speak to him through the media. I'll speak to him personally if that's required.
And you haven't yet, though?
I haven't.
Dan Bartlett, thanks very much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Wolf.
And so what would you want to ask Scott McClellan? I'll be interviewing McClellan this Friday here in the Situation Room. Here's what you can do. Go to ireport.com/Situation Room to submit your own video questions for Scott McClellan. We're going to try to get some of your questions to McClellan on Friday when he's here with me. Let's go to Jack Cafferty. He's following all this and a lot more with the Cafferty file. You know, you can't make this kind of stuff up, Jack.
No, can I submit a question for your interview Friday?
Please.
Without doing that iReport thing, I mean, since I'm right here with you.
Go ahead.
There have been allegations around for as long as George Bush has been president about rumors of past cocaine use. There is a fascinating passage in McClellan's book about a telephone conversation that McClellan claims he overheard the president talking about cocaine. And if you would ask him about that on Friday, the answer will provide, I think, some tremendous insight into the possible workings of George Bush's mind and kind of the way he handles subjects that he's uncomfortable with. It's penetrating, riveting, and compelling stuff, and that would be my request if you have time on Friday.
Will do.
All right.